Episode 17 of Bleach's 1000 Year Blood War arc anime was truly an emotional rollercoaster. This episode focuses on the intense battle between Komamura and Bambietta after she has her holy form unleashed following the end of last week's episode. So as with any episode review, there is a lot to dive into, from Komamura's incredible transformation, which includes his all new Bankai reveal and his emotional sacrifice, which wraps up his character arc in such a poetic manner. We get some callbacks to his words with Tozen from the fake Karakura Town arc, and we also learn what had happened between Komamura and the elder of his clan, who we had seen him meeting during the first core of the anime. Episode 17 is titled Heart of Wolf, and it's a beautiful homage to Komamura. This episode adapts the last 3 pages from chapter 555, and it takes us all the way up until the first 6 pages of chapter 560. So in total, we have about 4 chapters and 9 pages that have been adapted into this week's episode. I am beyond excited to dive into the details of episode 17 because in addition to all of the Komamura content, we see the remainder of Hashwald's confrontation with Shunsui and Nanao, as well as Mask wrapping up his brutal beatdown of Hisagi, Yumichika, and Ikkaku, and not to forget 2 mysterious individuals who have now suddenly appeared within the Serite that Mask ends up spotting. Now, similar to the other episodes of Core 2, we have yet again another post-credit scene which involves Ichigo in that strange realm. We're going to find out what is up with his eyes in this week's episode, why he is getting memories of the Soul King, and what Ichibei has to say about all of this. So definitely be sure to stick around until the end of this video, where I'll be breaking down this week's post-credit scene. So without further delay, here are my thoughts on the all-new 1000 Year Blood War arc episode of Bleach. Episode 17 picks up with Bambietta's holy form being activated, which looks absolutely incredible in the anime. The pacing is pretty fast as the first half of the episode focuses entirely on Komamura vs Bambietta, which adapts material from the end of chapter 555 all the way up until the midpoint of chapter 558 with Komamura's sacrifice and his transformation into a wolf. The second half of the episode has Hashwald's confrontation with Shunsui, which was really hype. Additionally, we have another anime exclusive scene in the second half of the episode with Uryu taking Kangdu and BG9 to Yuhabak following their defeats. I really love this addition, and it just fills in the gaps between certain scenes, while also giving more of a role to underutilized characters like Uryu, which is always a plus. Following this, we continue with the anime only scenes between Mask and the 3 Shinigami. The anime only content continues with this episode, and it does a fantastic job of syncing this off-screen encounter with the material that is within the manga. Mask then sees 2 individuals arriving in the Serite, but the episode wraps up with the Sternritter being confronted by Rose and Kensei. Now, similar to last week, we ended the episode with a very disturbing cliffhanger this week, which concludes Ichigo's journey down the path of Irazusando. There is definitely a lot of piecing together and reading between the lines in order to fully make sense of these post-credit scenes, but if you have been following my videos, then it shouldn't be really all that too difficult to follow. Kubo and the anime staff employ a lot of subtle imagery like the Soul King flashbacks, which is shown momentarily, as well as Ichigo's eyes, which contain 4 additional irises, and the 4 colors of spiritual pressure which surround Ichigo in this week's post-credit scene. Each of these details that I have described hold a specific meaning, which I'm going to be talking about later on. In summary, this was a really well-paced episode as we wrap up the battle between Komamura and Bambietta, which does in fact have some anime exclusive clashes, as well as some streamlining of dialogue, and it ends things on a truly emotional note, with the second half of the episode serving as a setup for episode 18, which is titled Rages at Ringside, and predictably this is going to be focused on Mask the Masculine. I've been reading some complaints that fans have had about Core 2 of the 1000 Year Blood War arc, like for example last week people wanted to see more of Shinji's Bankai, but you have to understand the nature of Shinji's powers. Kubo carries on the theme of inversion where Shinji's Shikai is more like a Bankai and his Bankai power is more like a Shikai. I feel like enough time was devoted to it within the anime. The entire scene was good enough to give me goosebumps, and I've honestly been replaying it all week. After having compared every episode of Core 2 of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime to the manga, I have to admit that it has amazing pacing, and it finds additional areas to cut redundant dialogue from the manga in order to add much needed new material to the anime, which really fleshes out some of the scenes. Flashbacks and certain moments are reworked into the anime in order to better fit with what is going on, and I'm going to be talking about about each of these specific changes to this episode in my follow-up video where I'll be comparing the manga versus the anime, so be sure to stick around for that. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this episode pays homage to the character of Komamura, and it really does let us appreciate the emotional end to his character arc, which is heavily underpinned by the theme of revenge and being ashamed of your roots. During the fake Karakura Town arc, Komamura had forgiven Tozen and was able to make him understand the truth in his dying moments. It was the words of Komamura that had convinced Tozen that the path of revenge was not the answer to avenge the murder of his friend. The truly upsetting aspect of Komamura's character is that he follows a similar path of revenge after the death of Head Captain Yamamoto. He becomes consumed by his desire to avenge the death of the man who had taken him in when everyone else had rejected him. It is easy to understand why Komamura had felt an immense amount of gratitude, respect, and attachment to Yamamoto, so much so that he had decided to also forsake his life for the very battle that Yamamoto had forsaken his life for. This is how the theme of revenge is brought back up and intricately woven into the character of Komamura as he returns to his ancestral home which he had abandoned, and he pleads with the Grand Elder to teach him the secrets of his clan. He pays the ultimate price to acquire the power that he needs to fulfill his desire for revenge. Kubo beautifully teaches us that revenge is a path without any reward. As Komamura falls to his knees with his true target in sight, his sacrifice proves to have been too much as his humanization technique wears off and he is transformed into a mindless beast. Komamura's heart that he had ripped out and offered to his elder is rich with vengeance, fury, and a desire for revenge. The elder of the werewolf clan states that sipping on the resentment within Komamura's heart will help him to live longer. He thanks him for his sacrifice, even if it means that he becomes a mindless animal. All of this is conveyed masterfully within the anime, as we get to see Komamura struggle forward. After defeating Bambietta, he tries to take a couple of steps forward, which impactfully represent his desire to avenge Yamamoto by defeating Yhwach for his sake. The transformation scene where Komamura is transformed into an animal was done so incredibly well within the anime. It was like a werewolf transformation with the black silhouette of his body with the blue background of the Quincy city, which just eerily had reminded me of any iconic werewolf transformation where we see it against a backdrop of a full moon's light. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't deeply moved by Komamura's story and how the anime did it so much justice in this week's episode. How in the end he realizes that he had given up his life for revenge, all because he had failed to learn from his own words that he had shared with Tozen during the fake Karakura Town arc. What you have to remember is that unlike Tozen, Komamura did not throw away his bonds for the sake of revenge, nor did he make the people around him who had respected him feel deserted by him. This is why Iba appears and carries Komamura in the end, telling him that they will continue fighting, and together they will defeat Yhwach for Yamamoto's sake. Even later in the episode, there is a really nice anime-only scene of Yumichika, Ikkaku, and Hisagi reacting to the massive explosion following Bambietta's defeat, and Hisagi realizes that Komamura was involved in this explosion as he tries to rush off to help him. Now this highlights the difference between Komamura and Tozen. Tozen had given up his bonds for his pursuit of revenge, which had ultimately led him down this destructive path for more power where he had acquired the ability to see by transforming into this hideous moth-like hollow. And then if you remember, he had the nerve to insult Komamura's appearance, failing to understand how horrible he inwardly and outwardly had become, all because he had fallen victim to the path of revenge. Contrastingly, Komamura's desire for revenge had given him an immortal human form, which brings this story full circle. He was initially ashamed of his beast appearance, but in the end he ended up becoming a mindless beast. He paid the ultimate price for giving up his heart. I love the themes and symbolism that underpin this episode of Bleach, as well as the callbacks to Tozen's character and the emotional fact that all of this was done for the sake of Yamamoto. It is truly top tier character writing and it makes for one hell of a tear-jerking episode. The animation of this week's episode is quite interesting to discuss. On one hand, most parts of the episode have rather average animation, starting with the main fight of the episode, Komamura vs Bambietta. While some might have had issues with Kokujo Tengen Myo being fully CGI, I didn't mind it personally. The animation was a little bit wonky in some bits, but once again it was fine overall. This in my opinion is a fight that needed animation the very least, but even then there was still some really awesome cuts that I did enjoy. There was this really gorgeous but brief cut that captures Bambietta's perspective as Komamura lands his devastating finisher, and it is just beautiful, and I'm not too sure who animated this cut, but they did a really fantastic job with it. If you remember, I stated that the fight between Komamura and Bambi didn't didn't really need all that much animation, but what I felt really needed to be animated well was Komamura's final moments, and sincerely they'd absolutely nailed the animation on this side. Komamura's transformation is animated perfectly, and there's some brief but really lovely character acting from Komamura as he collapses. This animation is accompanied by some really gorgeous art as he transforms, and I can confidently say that Komamura has never looked better than he does in this episode, and overall so much justice was done to his character. There's also some really brief but strong cuts scattered throughout the episode, like during the final moments of Bambietta's battle against Komamura, where she struggles to deflect the bombs away from her fast enough just as she is defeated. The scene has some great lighting, the voice acting is amazing, and I love how the animation is slowed down as we see the impactful demise of one of the first key members of the Sternritter. There is also another brief cut of animation later on in the episode where Hisagi swings his Zanpakuto Kazeshini towards Mask, and this overall looks incredible. There are also less stellar bits of animation like the continuation of the battle between Mask and the three Shinigami, and I do hope that things like this are corrected in the Blu-ray release of Core 2. But in summary, episode 17 was an overall good episode with average animation and some beautiful cuts sprinkled in between. In all honesty, it was good enough for what it wanted to do, and I believe that the next few weeks are going to be stepping up the quality considerably. Especially if some of you have read the manga, then you'll know what big battles are about to unfold. Now, I mentioned earlier on in the video that we have another anime-only post-credit sequence this week, and it wraps up Ichigo's training within the realm of Irazu Sando, the path with no entry to the shrine. Like last week, Ichigo struggles to move forward as Ichibei explains that he is being weighed down by everything that he is trying to protect. He also revealed that the memories and revelations that he keeps receiving are the power of the Soul King. Ichigo is once again shown several memories which reveal the Soul King holding a Zanpakuto, and he is then seen to be standing in the center of 3 whirlpools. We then see his limbs being removed and then him being imprisoned within the royal palace. Unlike last week, this week's post-credit scene also features some images from the first Quincy invasion from 1,000 years ago, as we also get to see a shot of the original Gotei 13. Now these memories flood into Ichigo, and he is then surrounded by different colors of spiritual pressure, and these symbolize various aspects of Ichigo's powers, like the color yellow representing his Shinigami powers, the color blue representing his Quincy powers, the color green representing his Fullbring powers, and lastly the red spiritual pressure representing his hollow powers. This highlights the mixture of powers that are within Ichigo, and they all originate from the Soul King. Now during this, Ichibei questions if Ichigo can withstand this power that is about to flow into him, or if he is going to be overwhelmed and destroyed by it. Now with the spiritual pressure entering Ichigo's body, his body begins to transform and contort, and it's accompanied by these disturbing screams. We get a close-up shot of his face, and then his silhouette begins to resemble the Soul King, and his body begins to deform further. Through all of this, he raises his glowing Zanpakuto, and the screen cuts to white. Afterwards, we see Ichibei smiling, and this implies that Ichigo has passed his trial and he has completed his training. Finally, Ichigo is then transported to the palace of Senjumaru, and he is surrounded by various fabrics as he asks what his next step should be. This concludes the post-credit scene, and it ominously sets the stage for next week's episode, where hopefully more information will be revealed about what on earth is going on with Ichigo. This episode was another well-paced and fairly animated installment of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. The major battles of Core 2 have begun impactfully with the intense battle between Komamura and Bambietta, as it takes the center stage of this week's episode. Along with the arrival of 2 mysterious individuals into the Serite, next week's episode promises to be one to definitely tune into. I've spoken about it a lot, but Komamura had really stolen the show for me this week, and he had left me in such an emotional state after witnessing the end of his character arc. I really enjoyed a lot of the padding out of scenes in this week's episode, and I really love how Mask and the 3 Shinigami had gotten their off-screen fight revealed to us over the course of these last 2 episodes. This week we also got to see Uryu picking up Kangdu in BG9, as well as Hashwalt's intense encounter with Shunsui and Nanao. I was hoping for Hashwalt's scene to be extended a bit more within the anime, but I suppose that it was adapted faithfully from the manga. Overall, I'm super excited for next week's episode, with Mask getting his time to shine in episode 18 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime, which is appropriately titled Rages at Ringside. Episode 17, Heart of Wolf, honors its title by respectfully saying goodbye to Komamura's character arc with an impactful send-off. I love the way that the anime adapted some of the manga material this week, and it added to some weaker areas of the manga which really needed some expanding in order to tie tie together some scenes that just appear out of nowhere. Now consider this video like my quick overview of the episode and a summary of my feelings of it. And as usual, I am going to be uploading my in-depth manga vs anime analysis tomorrow, where I'll be covering things that I really liked about the episode in comparison to the manga, as well as a couple of areas where I feel like episode 17 could have done a bit more of a better job in my opinion. So definitely be sure to subscribe to the channel and stick around for my comprehensive manga vs anime analysis video, where I'll go over all of the cuts, changes and additions to this episode. In the meantime, let me know your thoughts on episode 17. Did you get emotional like I did when Komamura was transformed into a wolf? What did you think about the defeat of Bambietta? And how about the new scenes that were included in this episode, like Uryu taking Kangdu and BG9 to Yuhabag? And what are your expectations from Mask's encounter with Kensei and Rose in next week's episode? And last but definitely not least, I want to know all of your thoughts about the truly disturbing post-credit scene, with Ichigo screaming and seeing those memories again, and Ichibei smiling strangely. I will also be breaking down this week's post-credit scene in great detail in tomorrow's manga vs anime video, so once again subscribe and stay tuned for it. I am really excited to read all of your comments on this week's heart-wrenching episode, and lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this video, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow for my follow-up manga vs anime deep dive.
If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.